Thank you very much. On to file item number 7, the Delta Independent Science Board report.
Hello, Chair Fiorini.
Chair Tracy Collier, welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We look forward to working with you and Phil and everybody else as we have been. So this report is covering our meetings in November and then one we just had last week, last Thursday and Friday. In November, for the first time since we have impaneled the Independent Science Board, we had a joint meeting for the first day with the Delta Stewardship Council and with the board. You folks were there. We don't need to go over what we did. I will say from the perspective of the Science Board, it was really productive for us to have that time together where we bounced questions off of each other, we responded. I know that there was some increased appreciation on the part of the Science Board as far as the issues facing the Council, and I think that was reciprocated. I think that you guys saw some of the issues that we're dealing with, especially on the VDCP and the review. So we also, at that meeting, Chair Eisenberg asked us if we could comment on the California Water Action Plan, which we discussed, and we decided that we would, with the gist of our comments being that because we've just finished this Delta Science Plan, and that was not mentioned in the California Water Action Plan, that in fact we strongly suggested that that should be used in the California Water Action Plan, or at least referenced as a framework for how science could be incorporated into that plan. And you have a copy of that memo that came from myself and Jay Lund. We heard from our Fish and Flows team, Judy Meyer, Joe Fernando, and Jay Lund. And now we've added to that team Steve Brandt, who is the newest member of the ISB, who joined us at our meeting last week. So they are in the process of surveying many agencies that are involved in the Fish and Flows technical side of things, and they'll be compiling the results of those surveys and embarking on that review. But first, we have this BDCP issue that we are grappling with as part of our statutory charge to review the draft EIRS for the BDCP. And so we spent a good deal of time talking about that, talking about the assignments for different chapters, how the board was going to tackle that document and try to be productive. We also did have some discussions in that first day when you folks were there about the timing of the review and whether or not to request an extension. It was a very lively discussion, I would say. And in the end, I think we have committed on the part of the Science Board to doing our level best to try to get comments created, synthesized, organized, and hopefully making enough sense that we can provide them to you, the Council, by mid-March for you to use in your deliberations. That was really the focus of our meeting last week. We had preliminary report outs from small groups of people that have been looking at many of the different chapters. We probably, of the 31 chapters of the EIRS, we probably paid a fair amount of attention to about 20 to 25 of those, I would say, that were some that we simply didn't have the expertise to review. Others were fairly minor, but we really spent a lot of time going over that. We spent probably the first day of our meeting really reviewing what we had seen in these chapters, what were the common issues that we thought needed to be addressed. From that, we derived a series of about 10 sort of major points that were coming up again and again as we reviewed these chapters of the EIRS. We provided those to Laura King Moon that evening because she was coming by the next morning to be there with some of her staff and some of the primary consultants working on the draft EIRS and answer questions for us, which I'm sorry it's not in the report we provided to you for this meeting, but it should be noted that she showed up, spent a great deal of time, as did her staff. They provided us with a contact person for further questions that come up. We found it extremely helpful to have that interaction, and it really helped us a lot in terms of how to frame up our review. So we also heard from Walter Beret about the CalSim modeling and some issues with how they have looked at the different ways of looking at the modeling, and I think it's outside of my area of expertise. Certainly Peter is well aware of it, as are other members of the ISB, and that's a subject that I think will bear some discussion into the future. And then finally, Dr. Jeff Mount came to us and gave an overview of his review of the previous administrative draft of the EIRS. whereas we're reviewing the public draft. But still, there were many commonalities to some of the issues they raised in their report for American Rivers and the Nature Conservancy. So we then, towards the end of that meeting, we have now decided, for the time being, that we will be focusing our review. We're going to, as normally the Science Board does, we will try to lead off our review report for you with a summary of the major issues that we see. And right now we're at 10 or 11, depending on how we decide to potentially combine or split them up. So we'll have 10 or 11 major points that we'll address very briefly, very succinctly. We will then also have a section that addresses the charge that you gave to us within the last year, as well as the statutory charge that is laid to us as the ISB for the review of this document. And then finally, we have a lot of technical information. Unfortunately, we are scientists. When we read these documents, we can't help but sometimes get into the weeds. So we have gotten into the weeds on some of these chapters, and we don't want to lose that information. So we will have a list by chapters of the 20-some of the 31 chapters that we'll have more detailed information on. So I think that's the main issue, is that we will have a 3-part report on the BDCP draft EIRS. We really intend to try to get it to you by the middle of March, so it's timely, so that you can use it. And with that, I think that covers most of it. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. Any questions? Phil?
Dr. Collier, just one suggestion. I know that as you and your colleagues go through the report, you'll identify potentially a bunch of questions and so on. But if you identify things that you think are not within our mandate to you or within the scope of your activity, would you be good enough to make sure that at least our staff has all those things you're flagging, even if you are not responding to them yourself? Because in documentation this large, I'll bet you'll find 10, 15, 20, 25 moderate, couple big size issues that are outside the scientific scope, but your scientists noted we'd like to at least get a record of that for our own review.
I think, and so we'll talk to the Delta Science Program folks that are working with us on this to see what they've captured, because that's already been happening. We've already come up with things that we start discussing and we get all worked up, and then somebody says, well, wait a second, that's not part of our charge. And we're like, yeah, but it's important. So that's been happening already, but I think the idea that we should try to capture that and make sure we do have a record of that is very useful. So we'll talk with Peter and the folks and the staff.
Doctor, I have a question. Are we going to have another joint meeting after you've given us this report or your answers? Are we going to then have a chance to sit together and mull this all over?
So our discussion,
prior to the sword of Damocles falling in April?
Is that when it falls? Okay. The intent on the Science Board is that, yes, that would be very useful. That we thought that the joint meeting was really useful. It would be good to have another joint meeting. We don't want to do it too often because it's a little clunky to run them. Both Phil and I wanted to be in charge all the time, of course.
Clunky.
He won. But we thought that if we should work out the timing on that. We've already set our meetings into 2014, but we did think that there would be great utility in having another joint meeting or some formal discussion of our comments, whether it means several of us come to a meeting of the council to present our review and have a discussion there, or whether we can actually engineer an actual joint meeting remains to be determined. But we thought, just in general, so you folks know from the Science Board's perspective, we did find it really useful. We have some new members, and you folks have some fairly new members. We thought twice a year might be a reasonable number of times to have an official joint meeting, probably no more than that. But the issue of having a discussion prior to the sword of Damocles coming down would be really useful. So we will do whatever it takes to make that happen.
So as it stands right now, your target date is in or around the fourth Thursday or Friday of March?
We just, actually, our precision, remarkably for us, just said mid-March. That's what we've said. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll work on the venue that's most appropriate for making that, presenting your findings.
Yes.
Great.
We'll look into March, a joint meeting then.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Tracy, thank you for accepting the challenge of trying to stay within the allotted timeframe that this process set forth.
We'll do our best.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.